It was just some type of.
Hey, this is Sports Slaw with Lomas Brown, the pro.
And Deb Schneider, I'm the prof. And together, we're the pro and the prof.
Sorry.
I know, Deb.
You'd think I'd grow out of that.
I know. That's why I say Ray did a great job on that. He really, because it's something that sticks with you, and he made it memorable. So, yeah, great job to Ray.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
well, I know.
Wow,
I know.
Big week.
Big week, especially, with what went on with Coach Gruden and, what's going on with Coach Gruden. And, full disclosure, he was my coach during the Super Bowl year that I had with Tampa Bay. And, to say that I'm shocked, I truly am. I mean, to be honest with you, because I was a year older than Coach Gruden when I was there in Tampa with him. Some of the behavior, some of the things that we used to do as far as a team, as far as them as a coaching staff, it was nothing out the ordinary. I never heard him say anything. He uses choice words, but it's a profanity. But, just anything homophobic or anything else like that, I never really heard that come from Coach. So I was just so taken back by it. And, they got the paper trail. I mean, that it was said, and it's kind of disappointing, especially, me knowing him and, just knowing what he stood for and, what he used to preach to us, and just to hear some of these things is kind of disappointing.
Yeah, I bet it's very disappointing. He resigned on Monday.
Yes.
And today's Thursday. We're still seeing the repercussions of that. A lot of emails and a lot of paper trail here. Misogynistic, racist, homophobic. Wow.
Yeah.
But you knew him. I mean,
I know.
How was he as a coach?
I mean, he was a motivator. He was a guy that would get up in your face. He was. I mean, but, to the standpoint of some of these other things, again, and then I think the people that he attacked, when you attack the commissioner, when you attack the president of the Players Association, and it's just, and Deb, I'm telling you, the biggest thing is who was in that chain of emails. That's the thing I think is going to be more like the Watergate. It's going to be who's involved in that chain, who knew about them talking like this, who was sitting around and thought that was acceptable for them to talk about this. It was a good old boys club. So you're just hearing a lot of things. You heard the president of Hooters was in on that. Of course, the president or the GM of the Washington football team, Bruce Allen, he was one of the guys included in on that. So I'm just waiting to see how many more people are included in on that.
Yeah, it's going to be people are going to tumble. I mean, it's just, it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. Yeah. But one of the things that's really fascinating is that they put it all in writing.
Yes.
And, we were talking about the fact that, so we put it in writing, but I deleted the email, so it's okay.
Right.
And tonight's guest is actually a data privacy expert. We have Jason Chung on here for esports, but he's a data privacy guy. So I'll be really interested to hearing what Jason has to say about this. So just let's get Jason on here. He's assistant prof of sports management at University of New Haven. He's also the executive director of esports at University of New Haven, and he's esports counsel at Zuber Lawler. So, and I know you've done things with the government on data privacy, and so I want to talk to esports, but what do you think about Gruden? I mean, what's going on here?
I mean, it's a shame. It's unfortunate that all of these come to light, but here's the thing: we knew these conversations were taking place at some level, right? They just felt invincible enough to put it in writing and send it amongst themselves using corporate emails, using company servers. And as Ray will tell you, anytime you put something down in writing and you put it on the internet, hey, there's an IT guy, there's an engineer that's able to get that communication. So this should be a lesson to everybody that work is work. If you use work materials, you're going to get caught out. And quite frankly, in this case, I'm glad that all of this did come to light, because quite frankly, this kind of behavior doesn't belong in the NFL or in professional sport at all.
Yeah, you're right. And in society too, you
Right.
know what I'm saying, Jason, in society, we're just trying to, all the things that we've been going through as a country with the COVID and, Black Lives Matter, and just, the attack on the Asian community, and just think about all the different things, a lot of transgender people being killed, so just think about it. And just for him to kind of say all this stuff, and like you say, it's in writing, and it's a good old boys club, and it's a chain link of these guys that kind of feel the same way Coach does. It's kind of disappointing, especially with some of the strides we're trying to make now, as a people, just to have that come out and it's taken over. It's captivated sports. It's captivated the news. That's all you've been hearing about. So it's just been, like you say, it's really disappointing.
It's one of those things where leadership at the NFL really has to tamp down on this, right? Because people will say, well, it's a private conversation, we don't really mean it. It's a harmless sort of thing that we say amongst themselves. But all of these behaviors are exactly the type of things that perpetuate stereotypes and bias and prejudice. And it has no room in the game today. And especially not when it comes to senior management of these teams, right?
Yes.
These are people responsible for people's careers, right? And if they have even a hint of bias in there and they feel free to express it, the problem is they're going to be able to go out and propagate this. Maybe they're going to, cut somebody that doesn't deserve to be cut because they like somebody else better because they're more coachable, whatever that means, right? So, it's time to really think about the ramifications of language, of behavior. And instead of saying, I'm a good person, I didn't mean it, they should say, well, why did I say it in the first place? How did I feel so invincible and untouchable that I got to say all this kind of stuff for years and get away with it, as opposed to, thinking about my own career or where it's all going.
I agree.
Right. And I think it has to be, we have to look at society as a whole. When this is coming down from the leaders, this is the coach, and with a lot of other people who knew exactly what was going on. It's not, I'm going to bring it bigger than football, bigger than sports. I mean, when we hear that from the leaders, people react.
It's multi-billion-dollar business.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So no, go ahead, Deb.
Oh, I was just going to say another multi-billion-dollar business
Yes.
is esports, and you're an expert in esports. So Jason and I were talking a little bit about how different esports are, and when we first chatted, I think, and now we have Big Ten teams, we have scholarships with esports, but they're not the traditional, we're going to go out and play football, we're going to play basketball. It's really a completely different type of sport. And I think, can you tell us a little bit about it? Why is it a sport? Why are we calling it esports?
Sure. I mean, esports is probably, it's a term that encompasses a lot, right? So at its core, when you're talking esports, you're just talking competitive video gaming. Usually people in teams that are competing in a title against somebody else. So, if I say, hey, we're playing competitive football against each other, we know what that means, right? You're playing one game. But when you're saying esports, it could be one of any number of titles. You could be talking about League of Legends. You could be talking about first-person shooters like CS:GO. So, really, it's a category of competition rather than just, video games encompass a lot, right? It's an art form as well, and there's many different types of titles that are on there. So you have to think about the fact that it's an expansive universe, and quite frankly, when you look at things like esports and gaming as a whole, as an industry, is actually the biggest entertainment form worldwide. It's 4 times larger than the global film industry. It's bigger than the film and the music industry combined. And competitive video gaming, the esports part is, yes, a very small portion of that, but it has a lot of room to grow because it's the competitive part of the most dominant entertainment form in the world.
So what other? So wow, Jason, I knew about sports, esports, but now you're saying that it's just other gaming besides the sports gaming. Am I correct? Wow. Okay.
Absolutely.
I didn't
So
know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
yeah, so there's all kinds of video gaming. I'm sure you've seen all kinds. So everything we've talked about, from Pong to Super Mario, all of that is gaming. When you do competitive gaming, you're talking about maybe first-person shooters where you're competing against, and it's you versus somebody else, and you're trying to kill them first. Or maybe you're doing a MOBA, which is lanes of traffic, and you're trying to beat people on a map. Those kinds of things. So yes, of course, you have the traditional video gaming side, which includes all sorts of games. But esports is a very narrow section of competitive games that people pay to watch other people play.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
Yeah. And it's huge. I mean, tournaments, and this is actually run by the athletic departments in universities.
It depends. So the thing is, in some universities, it is part of the athletic department, but what we do find is that sometimes it's part of faculties. So in our university, they're part of the College of Business, where I'm located. In other places, they might be part of the engineering school. So they represent the university, so they are varsity in that regard. But they might or may not be run through the athletics department, right? Mainly because the NCAA doesn't have dominion over esports, because esports has things like prize pools and obviously it has lots of different sort of parameters in terms of competition. So the NCAA has chosen not to get involved in that, and quite frankly, I'd be surprised if they even could get involved in that, given the fact that culturally it's so different in terms of competition.
Yeah. So Deb, I'm kind of curious about this. Could name, image, and likeness fall under that? Could they take advantage of the NIL e-gamers?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the
two lawyers. Yeah, absolutely. Of course.
Absolutely. Well, one of the biggest things actually preventing sort of esports being part of the NCAA is the fact that streaming and sponsorship of streamers, including the best competitive players, has been a part of the tradition of sort of video gaming and sort of esports. So they've already been making off their name, image, and likeness for years. So for the NCAA to come in and tell the people, hey, you can't have that source of revenue anymore if you want to be part of a collegiate esports team, it would be ludicrous. And quite frankly, we found even through the courts that, hey, even for traditional sports athletes, it's a sort of a ridiculous sort of vestige of amateurism, as Deb and I can probably get into a little bit more.
Yeah, Alston. We love Alston.
Oh, exactly. So we love it, absolutely. So and it was an outdated regime, but I think there are people are asking me now, are there sort of lessons that we can take from esports for traditional sports athletes? And I would say yes, absolutely. They can be Twitch partner. There's a lot of sponsorship guys coming in. The challenge for traditional sports is because the field is so much larger and the appeal is so much larger, especially for D1 athletes and head count sports like football and basketball, the money is going to be much more, right? On average. And that's going to have to be something that's negotiated through, the programs and the athletes and to a certain extent the NCAA, but I don't think they want to get involved with that anymore.
Well, one of the things that we talked about early on with name, image, likeness, I mean, the NCAA has controlled traditional sports with this concept of amateurism. And they've then kept everybody from the name, image, likeness, from profiting off their name, image, likeness. Alston, when it came down from the Supreme Court, changed that 9-0 decision. I mean, that's phenomenal. But that's a whole other conversation about the Supreme Court. But so now we have name, image, likeness, but the people who are profiting off it so far, and some of the top money earners, are not necessarily your top D1 athletes, which is a little more like in esports, because they are learning how to harness the power of the internet and social media and sponsorships. And I think that's where we'd see kind of a parallel with some of the esports, because some of the top players, that's what they're doing, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, people always say who's making money in esports, and it's definitely not the esports organizations yet, right? They're losing money eventually, just like Amazon, they hope that, hey, the asset grows large enough and the revenues grow large enough, we're going to make money hand over fist. But right now, they're content to just grow as organizations. The people that are actually making money, as Deb mentioned, are the streamers, right? The people who are on Twitch, who are basically talking to their audience, who are launching sponsorship deals. They're the ones making money. And in fact, they make more money in a lot of cases than the professional esports athletes, because there are gamers who are not professional level, but they're good enough and they have a personality where they can have fans donate money directly to them. And then the pro athletes, maybe they don't have that sort of personality. They're great at what they do. They get a salary from their team, but they might not have the same following on social media. So, one of the big things in traditional sports I use as an analogy is that one of the most popular football sort of personalities is a guy by the name of Donald De La Haye, Destroying, right? He was a kicker, I believe, in Florida. And basically he had a very passionate following, and the NCAA at the time told him, you can't actually run YouTube anymore. You can either kick for your team or you can be a YouTuber. And he chose being a YouTuber because that brought him millions of dollars, right?
Wow.
And now, I think that's where it's going to go as well. You're going to see people with more personalities taking over these revenue streams as opposed to the biggest star on the team, for instance.
Yeah. So can you explain to me the correlation between, because I'm fascinated about the law. You connected with a law firm.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the correlation with gaming and the law or law firms?
Well, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, gaming. So it's, and also, media. And there's no surprise that the law is prevalent everywhere. Everything from transactional contracts to mergers and acquisitions, to intellectual property, which is becoming even bigger every day. Every aspect of law is involved when you're talking about the entertainment industry. And the one thing I like to say about esports is it may seem like it's new, but it's a very mature piece of the entertainment industry. So anything you had to do in terms of sports rights or media rights or movie rights, you're going to see the same issues pop up in esports. You're just going to see a lot of different other issues as well, right? So, for instance, tech, how do we leverage tech in esports? How do we leverage new revenue forms like NFTs and crypto and all that kind of stuff, which a lot of teams are getting sponsorship from? So is it a traditional sponsorship deal, or do we take some of that and if they get compensated in terms of crypto, does that have a monetary value? All of these things are legal questions that are novel. But again, it's just the entertainment industry. As Deb will tell you, there are common issues throughout the law in every industry.
Right. And that's what we see. I mean, we take various areas of the law, we take copyright and we turn it into broadcast for sports. In esports, it sounds like what's happening. And thank you very much, Ray, for putting on a racing game. I really appreciate that. Near and dear to my heart, of course. But in esports, what I think we're seeing is that the publishers, whoever owns the game, is going to really be controlling how that starts off. And then the people who are like, and Jason, this is fascinating to me, the people who own the game aren't necessarily the ones who are making all the money, but it's the personalities who are streaming and playing the game. And when we say personality streaming and playing, those are actually the players and what we would call the athletes, if you will.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. So it could be the athletes making it. It could also just be personal, popular people online that are playing games, making that money as well. And what's interesting about esports is that, if you or I, and obviously Lomas, if you're playing football, we're talking levels. But the thing is, if we decide to just play flag football outside, we can broadcast that no problem, because nobody owns football, right? It might look a little different. It might not be as professional or slick, but fundamentally we can broadcast whatever we want. And there's no problem with the game of calling it football. With esports, that's not the case, right? So if I want to play that game and I want to broadcast that game, technically the intellectual property of that game belongs to the people that develop that game and who have the legal rights to that game. So if they say, hey, I don't want you, even if you have millions of followers, I don't want you using my game anymore as part of your broadcast, there's no recourse. You cannot broadcast that.
Wow.
Right? So that's what Nintendo does. And if you wonder why, hey, Nintendo's popular. Why don't I see Nintendo as much on these competitive things? It's because Nintendo doesn't like this kind of stuff very much, right? So they decided, hey, if there are popular things, unless we sanction it and we control every aspect of it, we're not going to have anything to do with it, and we're going to shut it down. That's what they do. And in fact, they've shut down popular events the day before it was supposed to go live. Even after people had traveled hundreds and thousands of miles to go to that event, they said, we don't want it like this. You're not going to be able to do this. And they sent the cease and desist. So that's the difference with esports. And it's the fact that there's so many different publishers and so many different titles out there that could be considered esport.
So, Jason, that leads me back to, will we see any retro games? I mean, now that you said everything you said, will retro games be a big part of this esport, or will it be games that are being developed now and in the future that'll be more of a bigger part of it?
The short answer is that it depends on what the audience wants, right? To be honest, there's actually a pretty robust retro games community. And there's also a type of competitive gaming called speedrunning, which is basically you take Mario 3, for instance, and you try to complete as quickly as possible, right? And this is actually a popular form of gaming that people will watch, and that there's an audience for. And, it is growing in terms of popularity. And eventually, if they decide to put more and more prizes behind it and people want competitions behind it, anything could happen. And that's the exciting part about esports right now. Yes, there are some, big titles and everything like that, but it still feels like early enough that things can really change in the next, decade or two. And it's a pretty exciting time to be a part of it right now.
Yeah, it's amazing how much everything has changed in the last decade when you think about this. But Jason, you just said something that was interesting to me. And Lomas, you're a broadcaster, ESPN. And when we think of traditional sports, and even with the new NFL deal, the $100 billion NFL broadcast deal, NFL sold rights to television, to cable, little bit of streaming. When we talk about esports, though, we're talking about other platforms that traditional sports haven't even really thought of, I'm going to say, much yet. Isn't that right? How do I watch a game? Where can I see a game?
So a lot of the games are broadcast, especially in North America, through Twitch, which is an Amazon service. And obviously we know Twitch because the NFL has some games on there as well. Yes. So that's a pretty popular streaming service. But abroad, especially in China, they have their own streaming services, right? Like Booyah and DouYu, and so they have their own services. And there are a bunch of different services that are trying to become competitors every single day. So, and recently, actually, the entire all of Twitch was leaked online. It's everything from their source code to how much their most popular talent makes. So, it was a huge scandal. Will people take that source, take that information and create their own competitors? We'll see. Lots of big companies have failed, but Twitch is also a service that literally started because it was one guy broadcasting his life through the internet. So we don't know where it's going to go.
Wow. So are you seeing younger and younger gamers, Jason? Is that gaming crowd? What's the average age of a gamer?
Well, there's two ways of answering that. On the professional side, they're relatively young, I would say, right? We're still talking about an industry that will chew through a professional athlete, and I really mean chew through an athlete of about 3 to 4 years, generally speaking, simply because they're practicing sometimes, and quite frankly, I think it's overboard, but they can practice upwards of 12 hours a day, right? And fast twitch muscles degrade, obviously, with age sometimes as well. So, professional athletes, you'll probably see them, by the early 20s or mid 20s, they're probably out of the game already. Wow. When it comes to casual gaming or streaming on the internet, we're actually seeing a broad sort of audience and sort of a network develop as well, right? So we're seeing a lot of young streamers, which is good and bad. And then we're also seeing a lot of older streamers, because guess what? Gamers are getting older too. People like to think that these gamers are like 18 or something. But I mean, we all grew up with video games. And so, the average gamer, even watching esports, is probably 30 plus, right? It's still a lot younger than, traditional sports fans. But we're talking about people that are looking closer to middle age rather than their teen years.
Wow. Their career sounds shorter than NFL player careers. Oh my goodness.
I know.
Wow.
But they don't have, which brings up the next thing, collective bargaining agreements and, and the unionization and everything. We really don't have that in this. It's more about sponsorships, or am I wrong, Jason? I was thinking this is more about the sponsorships and the personalities and the social media and, getting basically a follower. I mean, if somebody wanted to follow me play a game, I wouldn't do very well, but I could do this, couldn't I?
You could, and there are on the professional side, there have been efforts in some scenes to create a professional players association, right? So Counter-Strike players have tried to do it. On the League of Legends side, the company actually tried to help them create an association, just to have some sort of counterparty as well. But quite frankly, Deb, they don't have the infrastructure, and they're very young, and also they don't have the longevity to create it. So whereas in professional, in traditional sports, in the NFL or NBA, you have veterans that have been there a decade plus, that have seen the changes and can provide leadership. On the esports side, we're still talking about an industry in its infancy. So yes, you might have lawyers come in and say, hey, we're going to help you set up an association. But if the players don't know what that means and they don't have the leadership to coalesce, it's not going to go very far. So, they're starting, but it's still very, very fledgling.
Yeah. So, Jason, where do you see this going at? How do you see the growth of the game, and do you see it becoming more popular in D1 schools? I know, like I said, it's a lot of D3, a lot of smaller schools, but do you see it growing popular in the D1 with D1 schools?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, because I say, as I always say, higher education is also a business as well, right? It's a big business too. And, quite frankly, we know that this resonates with students. And for me, here's the thing. My goal is obviously to teach them esports and esports business, but I want to teach them skills that they can use wherever they go. And if they're engaged and more engaged because they're learning through an industry or through the lens of an industry that they're passionate about, and it makes them pay more attention and they do better in school, that just makes them a better worker, better leader going forward. So from my point of view as an educator, doesn't matter why they come in. If they come in and play video games and they learn about video games, but they learn the skills to be successful in business, it's a win-win-win for everybody. And of course, higher ed will take that a win every day, because it means that more students will come and try to take part in the educational experience. And that's tuition dollars at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And which is kind of saying, I mean, anytime we teach classes, we're trying to teach more than what the class is.
Absolutely.
I think, I try to teach skills for my students so they learn things beyond what the subject matter absolutely is. But one of the things that's interesting to me is kind of I'm going to throw it out there, kind of the public health aspect of it. I mean, there's COVID, but we have young kids who you mentioned are practicing 12 hours a day. And, I know as a mom, I was always like, no, you can't sit there and play video games all the time. You can't do it.
Right.
And then my friend said all the really good surgeons grew up playing video games, and now they're really good because that's the way surgery is going. But that's a whole other again. But what do you think about this? Because these are kids who are playing games, video games, not necessarily getting out, not I don't know, physical activity, but we were talking about the fast twitch muscles and all that. Mm-hmm. How does that relate?
Well, I would say that anything taken to extreme is not good, right?
Okay.
So we've learned that if you're training nonstop and not allowing the body to rest, you're not recovering. It's destructive to the body. If you're playing video games and you're doing nothing but playing video games, that's destructive to your body as well, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the big things that I think is important is balance, right? And one of the things that we try to do with our students is encourage them to have a balanced lifestyle, which means yes, you're going to be looking at a screen because it's 2021, and all of us probably look at a screen multiple hours a day, maybe not 12, but we get pretty close, I bet, between the different screens we look at. So, yeah, but we want them to have a training regimen. We want them to actually go out and have a social life, and we make conscious efforts to encourage them to do so and create events and networking things on the educational side, so that they're out constantly and not just looking at not looking at a screen and playing video games all day, right? And that's our responsibility to do that. The other part is that we need to actually encourage everyone to be mindful of how much screen time that they have, right? In the legal industry, I mean, my friends are looking at a screen probably longer than any of my students are playing video games, right? And we might not think that is destructive because, quote unquote, they're being productive members of society. But I would argue that, hey, overworking yourself is not a good idea as well. So the main thing here is all about balance and ensuring that that everyone recognizes that these are student athletes, right? Which means that they have an obligation to take care of themselves as well. So we certainly at the university level don't want them to burn out, right? That's bad for the student. That's also bad for us as well as educators. So we want them to, we want to create an environment where we're not encouraging them to practice 12 hours a day like the pros are. They're here to learn. And, obviously that means practicing what you're good at, but it also means, going out and being young as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny you bring that up there because one of the online Way Academy, which is an online school, they wanted to incorporate my foundation with our camps because they wanted the kids, just like Jason is saying, the kids spend so much time just looking at a screen or learning online. They wanted to give them the full experience. So not only that, they want us to provide lunch for the kids so the kids can actually have a lunch break so they could sit down at a table and talk amongst the other kids. They wanted them to have playtime when they could go outside and exercise, again, balancing out everything. And then they, like Jason saying, there was even the educational portion of it too. Something different than, say, e-gaming or something like that, something different to stimulate the mind with. So, that was things that we incorporated with our camp. And you kind of see a lot more schools. Like I say, Way Academy is an online school. You see a lot more of them starting to incorporate that with the kids that actually come to the building. You're starting to see them put in other activities for them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, our students are starting to track that as well. What is their level of physical activity? What is their nutrition like? Because all of these things, as we found out, not only makes them better people, but it also makes them better gamers too, right? There is a point of diminishing returns, and even the pros are starting to recognize that. So if you go to these pro teams and organizations, they actually have things like sleep pods. They actually have a training schedule. They will have a nutritionist and a chef on site. All these things that we don't think of. We think Doritos and Mountain Dew. They're sponsors, but the actual athletes are not doing that, right? Just like NFL players probably aren't, drinking all that Monster energy drink as well, right?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but you drink a lot of Gatorade, right?
Yes.
Don't want to get anyone in trouble with sponsors.
Right.
Well, yeah. So when we go to a tournament, I mean, these tournaments are huge. And it's been interesting with how has esports been handling COVID? Because I think a lot of people are thinking, oh, well, you're just sitting at home. And you're playing on your video, you're playing your video games. So COVID's not a big deal. In fact, this is a great sport during a global pandemic or a great series of sports. But yet we have huge tournaments that people travel to. You mentioned traveling.
Exactly. And, here's the thing, everybody thought, hey, this is a plug and play solution. Esports will take over. The problem is, the innovation with esports is that it's about getting people together, right? Whereas in traditional sports, we've always watched together. Innovation was actually bringing it into our homes in high definition. It's the opposite for esports, right? So they found out very basic things don't work when you don't have that in-person experience. So, for instance, what happens when competitors have bad internet, right, or an uneven internet? then you're not going to have really good, solid competition because they're competing with a different handicap, right? What happens when there's, when some players can travel and be close to each other and be able to practice together, and some people cannot, right? Or they're in different time zones and they can't sync. All of these became issues that they found, hey, there's actually no easy solution around it. And we can't just, wave a magic wand and have tech to solve these issues. So, obviously they took some time and they figured out the broadcast portion. They actually did create bubbles, just like the NBA did for their Orlando tournaments and everything like that. They had a bubble in Shanghai to have the League of Legends World Championships. And where they didn't have a bubble, they actually couldn't have those championships, right? Because ultimately they found, even if it's an online game, we need to be in person to actually compete at a high level. So, gaming was fine. Gaming had a great moment during COVID. Obviously, COVID's terrible, but gaming as an industry did well because it's something you can do from the comfort of your home. But when you have to get to that high level of competition, they found, we have the same problems all over. We don't have the right infrastructure. We don't have the right, disaster training for it. And so we're going to have to figure our ways around. And ultimately, it's made the product better because, they've realized where the pain points are. Just like I think the NFL, the NBA, all the broadcasters in traditional sports have figured out how to do broadcasting better. Lots of remote segments are a lot better these days. It's been a terrible period, but it's been great for innovation.
Yeah. So Jason, I just asking, what interesting, because you got me thinking about this fast twitch muscles. What interesting exercises have you seen some of these gamers do? Does it involve weights? What have you seen them do to try to help with their fast twitch muscles? That would be interesting.
So there are a lot of, there's an entire category of training, which is like aim training. So it's basically, something pops up and you have to click it as quickly as possible, right?
Okay.
So that's training fast twitch muscles. There's entire companies that are trying to leverage AI to figure out patterns in what you do, or heat maps of what you decide, what is likely to happen. So there's a lot of, video and on-screen training as well, so that they recognize, just like, looking at tape, they recognize patterns of behavior as well. So a lot of the, the great thing about it is a lot of the lessons from traditional sports have actually just filtered down to esports as well, because ultimately what makes you competitive, it's pretty similar all around. So, I would say that esports athletes probably do a hybrid of training that looks a little bit like a Formula One driver, because they need the fast twitch, but
right.
Hopefully they incorporate a lot more of that, the weights and all of that as well, because these games are long. They are very long. So, what they found is if you don't sleep right and you're not eating right and you don't have the right sort of energy and the stores of energy, you're going to burn out before the competition is done.
Do any of them watch film? Do they watch film of themselves? Wow.
Yeah.
That is unbelievable.
And it gets down as technical as just like clicks. Are you wasting time clicking around? Are you moving to the right area? Are your eyes going to the right area of the screen? All these things are actually part of it, right? And it's all become very, very technical. Hey, coaches today, there's a lot of motivation and inspiration, but they got to really know the technical side of things as well.
Wow.
So there are coaches. We have coaches. It sounds like a regular sports team.
Yes.
And and it's something we don't even think about. So we've got coaches, we've got trainers, we've got nutritionists.
They watch film, break down film.
We're lifting weights.
Yes. Wow, that's unbelievable. I didn't know it had gotten to that point.
But there's a lot of money involved.
Yeah.
There is a lot of money involved. Some of these teams are worth 100 million plus now, on the professional side of things. So of course they're going to protect their investment, right? And their investment is in the players. So, and of course they can make money on the personality side and the streaming side. But at the end of the day, if you're not winning, Lomas, this. Yeah. If you're not winning, nobody's paying attention, right?
That's true.
So they have to keep everybody competitive, and they have to take advantage of these things because, a lot of the investors from this side are from the tech industry. So whenever they see a problem or inefficiency, they're going to say, well, how do we get around it? Well, how can we use another data point to make it better? And it's been good, and it's been good for the industry from a competition standpoint. But it's the same thing as traditional sports.
Wow. So I'm thinking from an athlete's perspective. How do I get paid? I'm an athlete. Let's assume that I actually can play one of these games. I'm an athlete. How do I get paid? Do I have a salary? We talked a little bit about unionization. We've talked about the social media. We've talked about, how am I making money?
Well, actually, it's a pipeline issue. That's actually the biggest impediment, right? The first question is, how do you get noticed, right?
Okay.
Because there's no draft, right? There's no like, hey, you go through these years of college ball, and somebody will notice you, and you'll get scouted, and there's a combine. There are people trying to create combines, but it's still like the Wild West out there. So generally, you get noticed at smaller competitions or through the rankings in the game itself. You might want to send out a tape to different scouts for teams as well. All these kinds of things, right? And try to figure it out. If you're lucky enough to get approached by an organization, if you're a first-time athlete, they might offer you a small stipend or something like that, plus maybe some streaming revenue and sponsorships or something like that. I would encourage everyone to read their contract very carefully before they sign anything at that point. Maybe consult a lawyer that not me. But beyond that, if you're at the highest level, then you get signed to a salary, right? So some of these franchises in the biggest games were bought by multimillionaires and billionaires for $35, $40 million. So they have to have a roster, right? And so some of these athletes will get hundreds of thousands of dollars as a salary. And on top of that, they will have prize money that they can win. And usually they get the full cut of that, divided by the number of their members of their team. They will also have the opportunity to do streaming and get money through streaming on Twitch. And they will also have some sponsorships that they can get as well, right? Which they may split on some sort of percentage level with either their organization or their representation. So there's multiple streams of revenue if you're a high-level esports athlete. The salary, if you're lucky enough, it becomes a smaller part of the equation than the sponsorships, the prize money. The prize money is usually a little more secondary now, but sponsorships are the lifeblood of esports, just generally speaking.
So I'm thinking that this is kind of a combination of the way money's made on a team sport, like in the NFL or NBA, Major League Baseball, in addition to how money's made in an individual sport, which is much more of a tournament prize pool type thing. And then sponsorships are in both.
Right. Yep.
So it's really an amalgamation of a lot of things, isn't it?
Yeah, I would actually almost say it's like being a combination of a social media influencer and an athlete, right? Maybe not an athlete in, say, the NFL or the NBA, where the salaries are the primary driver, but maybe in something like lacrosse or something like that. Of course, the salaries are higher than lacrosse, but something along those lines, or high level minor league baseball or something like that, right? Where they make good sustainable salaries for a number of years, but as I just mentioned, the careers are probably not that long, so they have to create a brand as well around themselves, and that's the brand that will sustain them past their playing days, hopefully for a long time. And if that does, and they can also go into coaching or other things as well now. So this is an actual career path. And a lot of people, just like in the NFL, they go from, competition to being business leaders in the industry in other capacities as well, or going into the community and taking their earnings and doing something else as well. So there's a lot of replication in the process.
Yeah. Jason, who are some of the bigger stars right now in the gaming world?
So many. I mean, the thing about it is, the question is, who is the biggest? Who do you consider the biggest star, right? So there are obviously great players, right, and they're going to have lots of fans, but quite frankly, I think it's probably, I think almost everyone's heard of a ninja by now,
Yeah,
right?
Ninja.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So,
I've heard.
but-
Yeah.
And he was competitive, and he played a little bit of relatively, a medium level competitive play, but he made his money as a personality, and it's those people who are making the big dollars that everyone's really chasing. So if you do ever get a chance to see the list of Twitch leaked sort of compensation, you'll see that, yeah, these are the stars, because they're getting thousands of viewers every time, watching them, donating money each time they're on stream, and they're getting partnered money from Twitch as well, which is again an Amazon company, so they're making millions doing that. And I would argue that's the thing that's really driving the industry. The competitive side, it's great, it fills a stadium, it keeps people coming, but it's the personalities that, at least in North America, that keeps people coming back.
I think that's exactly what we're going to see with name, image, likeness.
Mhm.
Exactly. So esports is going to flip over onto the NCAA. I have one more question. Ray's telling me we have to wrap this up, but I have one more question. And that is, you mentioned that everybody's very young.
Mhm.
So I imagine if I'm signing a contract, I could be 15, 16, 17 years old. I actually can't sign that contract, can I?
Yeah, you would need a legal guardian.
So I'm getting a salary. I've got a great personality. I'm getting all these sponsorships. Mom, can you help me out?
Yeah, I know.
There is some of that. A couple of years ago, Buga won the Fortnite World Cup. I think he was 16 at the time or something, or younger. So yeah, they're competing. They're getting their guardian or parent is definitely happy to help to have them earn some money, especially if it's $3 million. But the main thing that I always tell people is you're probably not going to win the Fortnite World Cup, right? So be careful what you sign away, and make sure that even if it's your parents signing, that they understand what they're signing on your behalf as well, because some of these contracts, if you look at them, are very exploitative as well, right? So it pays to pay attention. And the good thing and the bad thing about esports not being as regulated as, say, the NCAA was and all that kind of stuff is the fact that, yes, we want to give people the freedom to sign these contracts and to take advantage of their talent, but there is a risk associated with it, and we don't want to just say, hey, it's all acceptable. You have to make sure that people are protected as well. So yeah, but the ways that they're going to get around it, maybe one day they'll start initiating an age floor, just like they did with the NBA. We have no idea, but then who's going to be negotiating that on the other side?
Mm-hmm.
These are the legal questions that keep me up at night.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I love them. Okay, so final thoughts, Lomas. What do you?
No, it's just an interesting world we live in today. I mean, it's just unbelievable to think that the games that the ping pong and the Madden and all those games like that, man, would just turn into just this big conglomerate. That's what it is, and seem like it's just gonna keep growing and growing and growing. So it's here. It's a factor, just like fantasy and all the other things that came along. E-gaming is here to stay.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Okay, Jason, I just want to ask you, what's your game?
Oh, I'm still a sports game guy, So, I played, probably every version of Madden, whether I liked it or not. I was just playing FIFA today. I remember playing with, Barry Sanders in Tecmo Bowl.
Yes. You're right. That's funny.
I will play all of that, but also, I not just competitive side. I like to play a lot of stuff that's non-competitive, a lot more story-driven, because gaming is huge. So some of these games have stories and production value that rival anything a movie can put out. So I like to take advantage of that as well.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I think we could talk for another hour here about this. And we will. And we will. So thank you so much, Jason. Thank you again, Lomas, and to all of our listeners. And check us out on Spotify, on SoundCloud, on Facebook, on sportslaw.com. And thanks, everybody. And go play a video game.
Bye.